Hello, yeah, welcome to class. Today we are going to look at how to read our tape. We all know this is a tape measure and it's used for measuring. And we know that it's used for taking body measurement, and it's also used for measuring the fabric or anything, because it's actually an essential tool for every fashion designer, whether you're a fashion designer, whether you're a tailor, anybody that has to do with garment construction, you have to use your tape measure. So that's why it's very important. But most times we do find it very difficult to calculate and to read, especially if you are just learning how to sew. And that is the essence of taking this class. So I'm going to try to explain this thing very well for us. Please bring the camera closer. So now this is a tape measure, and this measuring tape has 60 inches. There are some that are very longer than this, and they are 120 inches. But this is actually, I think this is the most common type of tape measure. So this one has 60 inches. So if you have yours, you can actually look at it to know where yours is. So we have 60 inches here, and we have two sides of the tape. We have this side and this other side here. This side is in inches and this side here is in centimeter. Can you see? So this, most times if you are working with patterns, you may actually consider using this, but most times people do use this inches. It's actually the most common part that tailors do use in this part of the world. So I'm going to be explaining this because for most of our class we'll be working with these inches. So now we have this tape, and you look at I know you'll be seeing some lines here. We have some lines here, and they all have their meanings. This means 1 inch. This is 2 inches. This is 3 inches. Can you see? Up to like 60 inches up to here. Can you see? So we have the inches, and they are all in whole numbers. But when you look at these lines here, you realize they have 8 lines. But because this part is covering this side here, we may not be able to see it very clearly. But we're going to be using these 2 inches from this 1 to 2 inches to know the number of lines. So if you should count these lines very well, you realize you have like 8 lines. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You start counting from this small line here. Can you see this? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is a half, and it has another long part here. So we have another 1, 2, and this is another one. This is another 4 here, which is the long one. So I'm going to represent it on the whiteboard so that we explain it further. So now I'm going to look at my tape and I'm going to use it to explain. So we have this one here. This is one. So this one cover it. Then we have a small line here. Then we have another longer line that is a bit longer than this. Then we have another smaller line which is of this same length. Then we have another one which is longer than this. Then we have this smaller one. Then we have another a bit longer one, smaller one. Then we have a very long one here. Can you see? So we have 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to start counting from here. So this is my 1. This here is my 2. This here is my 3. This here is 4. This is 5. This is 6, this is 7, and this is 8. So try to count yours, then you know what we're talking about. So we have 8 here. So now I'm going to use these numbers to explain them one after the other. So for this one now, this one, can you see? This is the one here, and that means we have 1/8. You know we have 8 lines, isn't it? So for these two, we will have, let me raise it up. This is what we will be working with. Can you see? So I'm going to start with 1. Please ignore the background noise. That's my daughter. So we have 1 here. This one here, it represents 1 over 8. Can you see? So is it clear? So 2 represents 2 over 8, 3 represents 3 over 8, 4 represents 4 over 8. Can you see? 1 represents 1 over 8, 2, the second line here, represents 2 over 8, 3, the third line here, represents 3 over 8. The fourth line, which is like half, is very long, that is 4 over 8. Can you see? So we have another, the fifth line represents 5 over 8. You can be using your own tape measure to understand what I'm talking about. Let me just underline it so that we'll see what I'm writing very clearly. So we have this. So the sixth line represents 6 over 8, and the seventh line represents 7 over 8, and the last line, which is the 8th, represents the whole number. So that is why it's 2 here. Can you see? So that is 2. So the first line is just 1 over 8. We all know that. So the second line is a bit longer than the first line, which is 2 over 8, and which is approximately 1 over 4. So most people call it 1/4 of an inch. So then it's going to be 0.25. So if you either hear quarter of an inch or 0.25, that means they are talking about the second line of the tape measure. Can you see it here? So they are talking about this second line here. So that is it. So the next one is the third line, which is this line. It's as small as the first line. It's not as long as the second line. So that one is 3 over 8. And you're just going to divide. You take your phone or your calculator, then you divide it by this. Have to get a calculator because I want this class to be very real as we can make it be, so that because I want to carry every one of us along. So I'm going to take my phone now. I'm going to use it as my calculator. So we'll be dividing each one after the other. So for this 1 inch now, for this first line, when you want to approximate it when you want to approximate it to when you want to represent it in decimal, so you're going to just say 1 divided by 8, which will give us 0.125. So in case you do see this, especially when you are drafting your pattern, you may actually see this. That is, it means is the first line. So the second line is 0.25. The third one is 3 over 8. So you just divide your 8 by 3 divided by 8, you get 0.375. So if you see 3 over 8 or 0.375, then they are talking about this, the third line. 1, 2, 3, this third line here. So the fourth line is 4 over 8. It's the same thing as half, 1 over 2, which is 0.5. So that is the fourth line, and it's actually the longest. It's the longer apart from this longest line here. So for the fifth line, which is 5 over 8, we just divide it by, for 5 now, the fifth line, so that's after half here. So after this, that is the fifth line. So you just say 5 divided by 8. When you divide it, you have 0.625. That is it. So for the sixth line now, we have 6 divided by 8. That is 3 over 4, and it's 3/4. That one too is a bit common. So we are going to have 0.725. 0.75. So that is it. When you divide it, 3 divided by 4. So for the seventh line, which is 7 divided by 8, that is 7 divided by 8. So that is 7 divided by 8, we have 0.825. So that 8 is 1. That's an whole number. So that is all about the decimal. So now the next thing that we'll be looking at is approximation. especially when you are approximate. You know, sometimes when you measure your client, or maybe when you are cutting your fabric, you may see some approximation. Let's say if somebody have like maybe the waist of the person is 40, let's say is 40, let me look for hair, something like 45. Now, you know, when you divide 45 divided by 4, you may find it a bit funny. You have like is 11, 45 divided by 4 divided by 4, you have like 11.25. So how do you represent that on your tape measure? You have like this is 11, then you look for quarter, that is quarter of an inch. Can you see? 11, then quarter of an inch, so that is 11.25. So let's say if you want to represent your 20.6 on your tape measure, it's very easy too. You just look for 20 here. 0.6 cannot be represented on your tape measure. So 7/8 is 0.825. Okay, we are talking about 20.6. So when you want to represent 20.6 on any of these lines, so let's say this is 20.6. now you want to represent it on your fabric, on your paper, on your tape measure, you have to go to 20. So this 0.6, if you notice 0.6 is not here. So what you just need to do is just to look for the one that is closer to this 0.6, which is this. So it's either you reduce it by going to this, or you increase it by going to this. So this is closer and this is also closer. So then maybe if, let's assume you want to use this point, because it's advisable to round up than rounding down, because it will reduce your measurement, or else, or except when you are working with a stretchy fabric. So you just go to this, that is the 5th line after 20. So this is 20, then you go to the 5th line after 20, which is 1 2 3 4 5. So this is the 5th line after 20. So that means 20.6. So this is it here. So the 5th line. So let's assume is 20.4 now. So 4 is not here. So the closest to the 4 is either 3, the 3rd line, or the 4th line. So if you look at it now, we have this 3, the 0.375 is close to 4, and we have this 0.5. So you can work within this. Maybe you can take 3, or you take the 4th line. So whichever one you take, you just so that means you just go. You can either take that the 3rd line or the 4th line. So you either take the 3rd line or the 4th line to represent your 20.4. So that is just the logic. You just look for the nearest number, then you represent it on your tape measure. So that is all about tape measure. You can ask your question in class. I will see you till then. Bye.